My name is Vivian Henson, and I am 18 years old. Before everything fell apart, I used to think my family was imperfect, but functional, messy, in the way most families are held together by routines, shared meals, and the quiet, anchoring presence of my dad. He died 2 years ago in a car accident on his way home from work, and since then, nothing about our house has felt balanced. My mom, who had always been impulsive but still loving in her own scattered way, seemed to pour every ounce of attention she had left into my younger sister, Katie. Whether she needed comfort or simply demanded it, Katie became the sun Mom orbited, while I floated somewhere in the background, dim and overlooked. Katie was 15, dramatic in a way only certain teenagers managed to be, as if the world were a stage dedicated solely to her emotional crises. She had this uncanny ability to spin the smallest inconvenience into a catastrophe of epic proportions. That's why when she broke up with her boyfriend Justin 3 days before my birthday, no one was surprised by the theatrics that followed. They'd only been together 4 months, but from the way she was sobbing behind her locked bedroom door, you'd think she'd survived a decades-long marriage ending in betrayal. She blasted sad music loud enough to rattle the walls and refused to speak to anyone except Mom, who responded with constant hand-holding and whispered reassurances. I tried to ignore it at first. Katie's meltdowns were like sudden rainstorms. You learned to wait them out because complaining didn't change anything. But by Friday night, her crisis became my disaster. Mom knocked on my door, her voice careful in a way that immediately set me on edge. She told me she had something important to talk about, which was always a bad sign. Vivian. With everything going on, Katie needs a distraction. She began avoiding my eyes. So we're heading to the mountain house for the weekend, and a shopping trip after. It'll help her reset. At first, I thought she was just explaining why they'd be gone during part of my birthday weekend. Not ideal, but survivable. But then she cleared her throat and delivered the rest almost casually. So, we're canceling your birthday plans for now. We'll celebrate another time when things calm down. The words didn't register at first. Canceling my birthday. We'd talked about it for weeks. I was supposed to go out with my friends, nothing extravagant, just dinner, a movie, and cake at home afterward. It was the one thing I'd looked forward to all month. My last birthday had barely been acknowledged, swallowed by grief and chaos. This year felt like my chance at something normal. No, I said quietly. No, Mom, please, it's my birthday. You promised. She sighed like I was making things harder than necessary. Katie is really struggling right now. You're old enough to understand. She needs this. Why does her breakup matter more than my birthday? My voice cracked before I could stop it. Her expression hardened. Vivian, don't be selfish. We'll celebrate when I get back. She didn't offer a compromise or even pretend to consider my feelings. It was decided. Final. And as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, she added that I'd be staying home to watch Charlie, my 6-year-old brother, since she didn't want to take him along. I can't watch him the whole weekend, I protested. It's my birthday. Mom's eyes sharpened in a way that made my stomach twist. If you keep arguing, I'll cut off your college fund. Don't test me. That was it. The line I wasn't allowed to cross. So Saturday morning, I stood in the doorway as Mom and Katie packed the car. The air was crisp, the sky painfully clear, one of those deceptively beautiful days that only make your reality feel worse. While Katie complained about a chipped nail she hadn't noticed until that moment, Mom tossed me a careless reminder to make sure Charlie eats lunch. Not one of them said happy birthday, not even in passing. Charlie at least greeted the day with uncomplicated joy. He thought it was fun having the house to ourselves, completely unaware of everything I'd lost. He spent the morning dragging me into hide and seek, proudly showing me his new Lego spaceship and asking why Katie was still crying, even though breakups aren't like when Daddy died, right? I told him he was right. Quietly, painfully right. My friends texted throughout the morning, asking what time they should come over. Explaining that my party was canceled felt humiliating, like admitting my own family didn't think my birthday mattered. They were understanding, but disappointed, and honestly, who could blame them? They had rearranged their weekend for me, only for me to fold under family pressure like I always did. Around lunch, I ordered pizza for myself and Charlie. It wasn't a celebration, it was survival. Sitting on the couch with a sad slice of pepperoni, while cartoons played on the TV, made the whole day feel hollow. Then Charlie walked over with a sheet of construction paper clutched in his tiny hands. On it was a crayon drawing of us holding hands, stick figures surrounded by crooked hearts. Across the top, in wobbly backward letters, it read, "Happy Birthday, Vivan." My throat tightened. That card was the only part of the day that made me feel seen. By nightfall, the house grew quieter, heavier. Charlie fell asleep, quickly exhausted from running around all day. I tried putting on a movie I'd been looking forward to, but I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed with another birthday message, it felt like another reminder of what I wasn't doing, who I wasn't celebrating with. I kept glancing toward the front door as if Mom and Katie might change their minds and walk in to surprise me. But deep down, I knew better. They hadn't even called, not once. Lying in bed later, I replayed the entire day in my mind, the canceled plans, the cold goodbye, the silence. It wasn't just about the birthday. It was years of invisibility condensed into 24 hours, years of being second choice, years of bending so far to keep the peace that I'd forgotten what standing up for myself even felt like. By midnight, one thought settled into place, solid and undeniable. Something has to change. I can't keep living like this. I didn't know that the very next morning someone would show up at my door and give me the chance to finally walk away. The next morning, the house felt strangely still, like the world was holding its breath after the wreckage of the day before. Charlie was on the living room floor playing with his toy cars, humming to himself, blissfully unaffected by the emotional crater left behind. I was trying to keep my mind busy by cleaning, even though nothing was actually dirty. It was just something to do, something other than think about how forgotten I'd been on my own birthday. Around mid-morning, the doorbell rang. Our doorbell never rang, not unless it was a package or a neighbor needing sugar. So when the sound echoed through the house, sharp and unexpected, I froze for a second. My first thought was that maybe Mom and Katie had come home early, though I wasn't sure whether that would bring relief or disappointment. I opened the door, and every thought in my head evaporated. Uncle Dave stood on the porch, holding a suitcase in one hand and a pink bakery box in the other. His hair was grayer than I remembered, and he looked like someone who'd driven all night without rest, but he was smiling. A soft, genuine smile that knocked the air out of me. "Happy belated birthday, kiddo," he said. "Brought donuts. Figured you could use some." For a moment, all I could do was stare. I hadn't seen him in years, not since before Dad died. And he wasn't the drop-by unannounced type. Something in my expression must have shown my confusion, because he chuckled awkwardly. "Mind if I come in?" I stepped aside automatically, still processing the fact that he was here at my house on the morning after the worst birthday of my life. Charlie saw him and lit up instantly. "Uncle Dave!" He shrieked, barreling toward him. Dave bent down, scooping him up with one arm like he weighed nothing, spinning him once before setting him down. For the first time in days, the house filled with real laughter. After the initial chaos, he followed me into the kitchen and placed the donut box on the counter. The sugary smell drifted out when he opened it, and I swear I almost cried again. He pulled out a chair and gently nudged me into the one across from him. So he began folding his arms. Sharon called me. Aunt Sharon. Dad's older sister. She checked in with me sometimes, little texts here and there, asking how school was going, how Mom was doing, if I was okay. Yesterday she'd asked how my birthday was. I'd told her it was fine. Nothing special. Apparently she hadn't bought that for a second. "What exactly did she tell you?" I asked, embarrassed to hear my own voice crack a little. Uncle Dave gave me a look, the kind adults give when they can see straight through the "I'm fine" mask you've been wearing. "Enough," he said. "About the trip, about the canceled plans, about everything." He didn't say it with anger, just quiet disappointment, and somehow that made it feel worse. I tried to shrug it off. "It's whatever. It's not a big deal." He leaned forward. "Vivian, you can tell me the truth." Something about the way he said it, steady, patient, without judgment, made my chest tighten. And once the words started coming out, I couldn't stop them. The frustration, the loneliness, the way Katie always came first. The silence from Mom on my birthday, the threat about my college fund, the way I'd spent the whole day babysitting instead of celebrating. By the time I finished, my hands were trembling. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding in. Uncle Dave didn't interrupt, not once. When I finally stopped talking, he leaned back, exhaling a long, low breath. Well, he muttered, "That's some serious crap." Then more firmly, "And none of it is your fault." I laughed weakly, wiping my eyes with the heel of my hand. Hearing an adult finally say it so plainly felt like someone had taken a bag of rocks off my chest. He watched me for a moment, then asked, "So, what now? What's your plan?" "My plan," I repeated, confused. I didn't think I had one." "Well, kiddo," he said, sitting up straighter, "you can't stay here. Not like this. Not with them treating you like the designated afterthought. So here's what I'm thinking." I held my breath. "Pack a bag," he said. "You're coming with me." I blinked. I can't just leave. Mom will freak out. And Charlie. We'll figure out Charlie, he cut in gently. But you need space. You need air. And I'm giving you that. It felt impossible, too sudden, too dramatic. Kids don't just pick up and leave home like that. But the longer I sat there, the more it made sense. Why was I staying out of obligation? Guilt habit. Certainly not because anyone here treated me like I mattered. But what if Mom cuts my college fund, I whispered. Uncle Dave snorted. Let her try. I'll help you. And she won't want to explain to the family why she's punishing her own kid for leaving a toxic situation. I managed a small laugh. And in that laugh, something cracked open inside me, a tiny, fragile sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. I need to think about it, I said. Good, he replied. Think. Then choose what's best for you for once. He didn't push. He spent the entire day playing with Charlie, helping me with chores, acting like he'd always belonged here. By evening, after watching them laugh together on the living room rug, I knew what I wanted. I wanted out. When Mom and Katie finally came home that night, tired and holding fancy shopping bags, they froze at the sight of Uncle Dave. What are you doing here? Mom asked stiffly. We need to talk, he said, in private. He led her into the kitchen. I wasn't supposed to listen, but I couldn't help hearing snippets through the thin walls. You can't keep treating her this way. She's a child, not your emotional punching bag. Favoritism isn't parenting. What you did yesterday was cruel. Mom's voice rose defensive, outraged, then quiet or shaken. When Uncle Dave emerged, he didn't look angry, just tired. Get your things, Vivian, he said gently. You ready? I glanced at my small bag sitting by the door. My heart thudded in my chest, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of choosing myself. I picked it up. As we walked out, Mom said nothing to stop me. Katie didn't look up from her phone. The night air felt crisp, freeing. As Uncle Dave's truck pulled away from the house that had never really been home, I watched the windows shrink in the rearview mirror and felt the weight of something lift, something I hadn't even known I'd been carrying. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was finally moving forward. Moving in with Uncle Dave felt like stepping into a different universe, one where the air wasn't charged with tension, where conversations didn't feel like emotional minefields, and where silence wasn't something to fear. His home was small, just a 2-bedroom house on a quiet street, but to me it felt open and safe, in a way my old house never had. He handed me a key the moment we walked in. This is your home now, he said simply. Make yourself comfortable. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those words until my throat tightened, and I had to look away so I wouldn't cry in front of him. The first couple of days were an odd mix of relief and awkwardness. I'd never lived anywhere except my mom's house. I wasn't used to picking where to put my toothbrush or choosing which kitchen cup to use without someone snapping at me for picking the wrong one. Even taking a shower without someone banging on the door felt like a luxury. Uncle Dave didn't hover. He moved around the house with a kind of quiet steadiness, letting me adjust at my own pace. He worked weekdays at an auto repair shop he co-owned with his best friend Mike, so he'd leave early in the morning and come home smelling faintly of motor oil. Evenings were simple, usually dinner, a little TV, or him tinkering with something in the garage. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't walking on eggshells. The biggest change came with school. Switching during my senior year felt risky, like I was ripping up the last bit of stability I had left. But Uncle Dave insisted it was a fresh start, and he handled everything at the office with such confidence that I wondered if life would have been different had he been around more when Dad was alive. My first day at the new school was rough. Walking into a building full of strangers felt like being dropped into an ocean and told to swim. Everyone already had their friend groups, their routines, their inside jokes. I felt like the intruder. But by the end of the week, things shifted. A girl in my English class named Mia complimented my notebook doodles. A guy from chemistry asked if I wanted to join their lab group. People weren't overly friendly, but they weren't cold either. It was the first time in a long time I didn't feel invisible. Uncle Dave noticed the change. How's school, he'd ask every evening, dish towel over his shoulder flipping burgers or stirring pasta. Better than expected, I'd admit, usually surprised to hear myself say it. He never pried, never asked for more than I wanted to give. He listened, nodded, offered the occasional piece of advice. It was such a stark contrast to the emotional tug-of-war I'd grown up with that sometimes it made me pause in the middle of dinner, realizing just how foreign and how wonderful it felt to be spoken to like an equal. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after I'd moved in, he found me sitting on the couch, surrounded by textbooks, frustration written all over my face. My old school's teaching pace was different, and catching up felt like trying to sprint uphill. "Everything okay?" he asked, leaning over the back of the couch. "I'm drowning," I muttered. Chemistry hates me. He laughed softly. Chemistry hates everybody. Want help? I looked up at him skeptically. You know chemistry? Nope, he said cheerfully. But I know stubbornness. And you've got plenty of it. You'll figure it out. It was such a simple vote of confidence that I actually did figure it out. Somehow, that night, I pushed through the chapter and aced the quiz the next day. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Grocery shopping became a weirdly therapeutic routine. Uncle Dave would toss a carton of ice cream into the cart every time and shrug off my protests with house rule, there's always ice cream. On weekends, we'd go to the park or drive out to a scenic overlook or visit little diners. Uncle Dave claimed had the best pancakes in the county. He had this way of living that made everything feel lighter, like the world didn't always have to be so sharp-edged. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when something felt off. Sometimes I'd catch him sitting down a little too slowly or rubbing his chest, like he was trying to calm a muscle that wouldn't behave. Once I saw him pause at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the railing for a few seconds before climbing up. Everything okay? I asked once. Yeah, he said, brushing it off. Just getting old. At the time, I believed him. I didn't know to look deeper. I didn't know those small moments were warnings. Then, one Wednesday night, everything shifted again, not with a doorbell this time, but with an email. I was sitting at the kitchen table finishing homework when my phone buzzed. The sender line read, Mom. The subject line read, I owe you an apology. My chest tightened. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Mom wasn't the apologizing type. If anything, she doubled down when confronted. So seeing those words felt like the ground tilting sideways. I opened the email. It was long. Pages long. At first, it read like a real apology. She wrote that she'd been unfair, that losing Dad had shattered her more than she realized, that she'd leaned on Katie because she felt they understood each other better. But as I kept reading, the tone shifted. Slowly, subtly. She began explaining her struggles, her stress, her exhaustion. And then came the sentence that felt like being punched in the stomach. When I was pregnant with you, your father had an affair. The words blurred, my heartbeat pounded in my ears. She explained everything, how she'd found out how betrayed she'd felt, how she'd forgiven him, but never healed, how seeing me reminded her of that time. She said she didn't mean to take it out on me. She said she knew she had. She said she hated herself for it. She said she wanted another chance. I read the email 3 times. Each time my world tilted in a new direction. Dad, my hero, had cheated on her, while she was pregnant with me. And all my life, I'd been living under the shadow of a wound I didn't cause and couldn't have prevented. My hands shook. I didn't know if I wanted to cry, scream, or throw my phone across the room. Instead, I called Uncle Dave. He answered on the second ring. Everything okay, kid? No, I whispered. Can you come inside? I need to talk. When he sat down at the table and I handed him my phone, he read the email quietly, carefully. His expression darkened, not with anger, but with heartbreak on my behalf. When he finished, he set the phone down gently. Vivian, he said, listen to me. None of it is your fault. I swallowed hard. She wants a second chance. He nodded slowly. And you get to decide what that looks like, or if it happens at all. You don't owe her forgiveness just because she suddenly wants it. I breathed shakily. What should I do? Whatever helps you heal, he said simply. Not what helps her feel better. His voice was steady grounding. For the first time since opening the email, I felt like I could breathe again. I think I need time, I said. Then take it. So I did. I didn't respond. Not that night. Not the next. Not for weeks. And as time passed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. But I couldn't know. That just as I was finally building a life worth living, the world was about to rip the rug out from under me again. Life with Uncle Dave eventually settled into a warm, steady rhythm that felt almost unreal after years of living in quiet, emotional chaos. I was doing better in school than I ever had, reconnecting with hobbies I thought I'd lost, and finally starting to feel like a person instead of a problem. The more time passed, the more I felt myself exhale, like my body was slowly releasing tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. By the second month, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't bracing for yelling or guilt trips or being told to understand Katie's feelings. I was just living, and it felt good. Maybe that's why what happened next hit so hard. You don't realize how fragile happiness is until you see how easily it can shatter. That Friday afternoon felt completely ordinary. School let out early for a teacher workday, and I stopped by a small bakery on my way home. Uncle Dave had an embarrassing weakness for chocolate chip cookies, the giant gooey kind that left melted chocolate streaks on your fingers. I thought it would be nice to surprise him for our usual Friday movie night. The sky was warm and golden when I walked home, the kind of afternoon that makes everything look softer. I let myself imagine us sitting on the couch, later arguing over which movie to watch, him insisting that nothing beats the classics, even though his idea of classics was mostly old action films with terrible one-liners. When I walked into the house, it was quiet, peaceful. I assumed he was still at the shop. I shot him a text, got cookies for movie night. Don't work too hard. Then I flopped onto the couch, turned on the TV, and let myself relax for the first time all week. But an hour passed, then two. By 8 o'clock, uneasiness crawled up my spine. He always texted back even if it was just a thumbs up. I checked his location, but his phone was off. My stomach twisted. By 9, I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. That wasn't normal. Uncle Dave wasn't forgetful or careless, or the kind of person to leave me wondering. He always kept his phone charged in case you need me, kiddo. Those were his exact words. At 9:30, the doorbell rang. Relief hit me so fast it felt dizzying. I ran to the door expecting him. Maybe he'd forgotten his keys, or maybe he was carrying something heavy. But when I opened it, 2 police officers stood on the porch. Their expressions alone told me everything I needed to know even before they spoke. "Are you related to David Henson?" one of them asked. My throat tightened. "He's my uncle. I live with him." The other officer stepped forward slightly. "I'm very sorry. He suffered a medical emergency at work earlier today. The paramedics responded immediately, but he didn't survive." For a moment, the world froze. The hallway tilted. My ears rang. Words dissolved. I could see their lips moving, could see one of them handing me a pamphlet about grief support, but everything felt far away, muffled, unreal. Someone else's nightmare. Uncle Dave couldn't be gone. I'd just texted him. I'd just bought cookies for him. We had plans. We had routines. He promised he'd always... The officers left. I closed the door quietly, almost politely, like I didn't want to disturb the silence swallowing the house. Then I sank to the floor. I don't know how long I stayed there, minutes, hours, curled up on the mat by the door, unable to breathe, unable to think. Unable to make sense of the words, "didn't survive." My chest felt hollow and crushed at the same time. My hands shook so violently, I had to press them against my knees to stop them. Eventually, I called Mike, Uncle Dave's best friend and business partner. He answered on the first ring, breathless, like he'd been waiting for the call. "I'm so sorry, kid," he said gently. "I'm so damn sorry." His voice cracked, and somehow that made everything even more real. Mike came over within 20 minutes and didn't leave my side the entire night. He handled every phone call, every form, every decision I wasn't capable of making. The next few days blurred into one long ache. The funeral was small, but packed with people whose lives Uncle Dave had touched. Neighbors, workers from the shop, customers he'd helped for free. A single mom he'd once driven across town at midnight when her car broke down. Every person had a story about him, about his kindness, his patience, his quiet way of showing up when it mattered. Mom and Katie came too, but their presence felt hollow, obligatory. Mom hugged me stiffly and murmured, "If you need anything, let me know," but her voice lacked warmth. Katie barely looked at me. They left before the reception even started. And when they walked out the door, the room actually felt lighter. A week later, Uncle Dave's lawyer called me in for a meeting. I didn't expect anything. I figured there'd be paperwork, a transfer of the house back to his estate, maybe arrangements about where I'd live next. But instead, the lawyer unfolded the will on the desk and read aloud, "I leave everything I own to my niece Vivian Henson." I stared at him numb. Everything. His house, his savings, his share of the auto shop. All of it. I felt sick, grateful, heartbroken, guilty, all at once. He had given me more than a home. He'd given me a future. Mike offered to buy Uncle Dave's share of the repair shop. It was the right choice. I knew nothing about running one, and he'd promised Uncle Dave he would take care of it. The sale gave me a financial safety net I never imagined having. I kept the house. Selling it felt impossible. His jacket was still hanging by the door. His tools were still arranged perfectly in the garage. His coffee mug still sat on the counter. Letting go of the house would have felt like letting go of him. For weeks, I lived quietly, carefully, like the house might crack if I moved too fast. Grief settled into me in a dull, persistent way. Not loud, not sharp, just always there. I thought the worst was over. Then my mother called. I stared at her name on the screen, debating whether to answer. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. Part of me hoped she wanted to check in, maybe apologize again, maybe really try this time. But the moment I picked up, I knew better. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with forced warmth. How are you holding up? I'm managing, I said cautiously. That's good. That's really good. So listen, things have been tight around here. Katie's struggling and Charlie's outgrowing everything. It's just been hard. She sighed dramatically. And well, I was hoping you could help out. Just a little. I froze. There it was. Not grief, not concern, not love. Money. I don't think I can do that, I said slowly. Uncle Dave left this for my future. It's not— Oh, come on, Vivian. Her voice sharpened immediately. Family helps each other. You have more than enough now. Don't be selfish. The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. My voice trembled, not with fear, but anger. I spent years being the afterthought, the babysitter, the stand-in parent. My birthday didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. I finally have something of my own, and you want to take that too. No, I'm done. Silence crackled through the phone. Then Mom spoke cold as a blade. I'm sorry you feel that way. The call ended. A few days later, she texted an apology, then another request for money. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. It wasn't painless. But for the first time in my life, the distance felt like healing, not loss. And in the quiet of Uncle Dave's house, surrounded by the pieces of the life he'd built with so much care, I began to realize something. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up. The weeks after I cut off contact with my mother were strangely calm. Not empty, just calm, like a storm had finally passed and left nothing but quiet skies behind. I still missed Uncle Dave every single day. His absence echoed through the house in 100 small ways. The silence of the garage at night, the empty chair at the kitchen table, the jacket still hanging on its hook like he might walk in and grab it. But there was also a sense of clarity settling over me, something steady and solid I'd never felt growing up. I wasn't waiting for yelling for guilt for the next crisis disguised as family responsibility. No one was going to barge into my room demanding something. No one was going to take my plans away because someone else's emotions were louder. For the first time in my life, I had control over my own space, my own time, my own future. I kept the house exactly the way he left it at first. It felt wrong to move anything like I'd be erasing him. But slowly, gently, I started making it my home too. I replaced the curtains with ones that let in more sunlight. I repainted the living room a soft blue that reminded me of the hiking trips Uncle Dave took me on. I framed one of his old photos of him and Dad from years ago and placed it on the hallway table. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like a museum and started feeling alive again. School became easier, and I let myself lean into the progress. I made more friends, not the instant inseparable kind, but the slow, steady ones who sit with you during lunch and ask how your day was like they genuinely care. I studied harder than I ever had, partly because I wanted to honor what Uncle Dave gave me, partly because for once I wanted something for myself. There were nights when grief hit harder than expected, like when I found one of his old flannel shirts buried in the laundry room cabinet, or when I caught myself saving a show on the DVR, because Uncle Dave will want to watch this. Moments that reminded me, loss isn't linear. It rises, sinks, swells again. But I kept going. One rainy afternoon, about 2 months after his funeral, I found myself sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by paperwork and envelopes. One of the letters was from the auto shop Mike now fully owned, updating me on the business transition. Another was from the bank about the estate account. It was overwhelming, but handling it made me feel capable, like I wasn't just a kid pretending to be an adult. While sorting through a stack of documents, I found a small brown envelope with Uncle Dave's handwriting on it. My breath caught. Inside was a single note on lined yellow paper. For the day you need a reminder, you're stronger than you think, kiddo. Dave. I pressed the note to my chest and cried harder than I had since the night he died. Not because the grief was fresh, but because the love was. Even in death, he was still finding ways to steady me. After that, something shifted inside me. I stopped feeling like a helpless passenger in my own life. I started thinking about what came next. I finished senior year with better grades than I'd ever had. I visited colleges. I talked to counselors. I made plans, not the vague, maybe one day kind, but real ones. Practical ones. The kind of plans people make when they believe they deserve a future. And with every step forward, my mother's silence became less of a wound and more of a boundary I was proud of creating. She sent a couple of emails after I blocked her number, polite but stale apologies layered with thinly veiled requests for help. I deleted them unread, not out of spite, out of necessity. My healing couldn't survive being pulled back into the same toxic orbit I'd escaped. Katie never reached out. Charlie sent one drawing through Aunt Sharon, a shaky stick figure picture of him and me, holding hands just like the birthday card he'd made. I hung it on my fridge. Sometimes I wondered what things would have been like if Mom had gotten real help after Dad died, or if she'd treated me as a daughter instead of a living reminder of her pain. But every what if was just a dead end, and I was done living in places where nothing grew. Instead, I focused on what Uncle Dave taught me without ever sitting me down for a lesson. That love doesn't have to be loud to be real. That family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up. That choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And that healing is quiet, slow, and deeply personal. One evening, near the end of summer, I stood at the front door, staring at Uncle Dave's old leather jacket hanging on its peg. It still smelled faintly of him motor oil pine and something warm I could never quite name. I slipped it on. It was a little too big for me, the sleeves long, the shoulders loose, but wearing it felt like carrying a piece of him with me, like he was still here in some invisible way guiding me forward without needing to say a word. I locked the door behind me and stepped out onto the porch. The sky was painted pink and gold, the kind of sunset Uncle Dave would have pointed out with a quiet whistle. For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting the warm breeze brush against my face. I wasn't the overlooked kid from that house anymore. I wasn't the girl begging for scraps of affection. I wasn't the one forgotten on her birthday. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd clawed her way out of a life that tried to shrink her. And as I walked down the porch steps, jacket wrapped around me like a shield and a promise. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would make a life worth living because Uncle Dave believed I could.